So we've got some record for those people that were not able to make it today. So today we're kind of doing two different things. We're going to start with a really quick lecture about monitoring and rangeland inventories, because that's really going to help us set the stage as we move into the grazing management plan, which we will hopefully have a guest speaker next week. I'm trying to line that up right now. And so with that lecture, you guys are welcome to take notes and stuff. I will post the slides, the full slide set, as a resource. So don't nod off and stuff, because this is really going to help set a lot of the structure around our grazing management plan. And so as we get going, please just pop in, ask questions as needed, etc. And then the second part of class is we are gonna start working with our strengths. So I'm very curious as to what your results were. So I'm going to have you guys kind of report that out in a Google Sheet, because I'm going to do a really quick analysis with it. And then I'm going to have you guys kind of get into some or one activity, as long as we have time. I think we can make it. And then we'll pick up the rest of the Strength Finder activity either next week or a little bit later in the semester. But I've found that really getting a good handle on what our strengths are can really help us when we are in group situations. So, if somebody is better as a communicator, then they probably should be doing the communicating. And if somebody is better as an organizer, they should probably do the organizing. And instead of just taking, like, this person's going to take the introduction, this person's going to take the body, this person's going to take the conclusion, that gets really choppy really quickly. So, all right. So let me just switch over. We'll look at Blackboard real quick to make sure everybody's on the same page about what is due. Come on. Go. All right, so we are again in week 4. I think we went over this on Monday. It's just I've slept since then. So as far as lecture stuff, we're really hitting 2 major topics this week. We are talking about rangelands of the US and then rangelands of the world. And then we're switching gears and talking about soil, because soil is really going to set a lot of the basis for how we manage rangeland. And so I want this foundational material to be fresh in your mind as we start walking through the grazing management plan portion of the class. And so that information is captured in the quiz that is going to be due on Friday by end of day. And then I also threw in Monday's Zoom recording in this folder as well. As far as lab today, you guys can ignore this grazing management plan semester thing. That only shows up on my end. It doesn't show up on your end. But I did just go in and create a really quick Strength Finder assessment. So this is this assignment is where you can download, answer the questions, save it as a PDF and upload it. And a lot of these questions we're going to work through today. So it's just a matter of completing it. But it will also be due Friday by end of day as well. So that's what we've got going with Blackboard this week. So holler if there are any questions. If not, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, and we are going to walk through a lecture really quickly. Maybe if I can work my computer. There we go. There we go. Okay. Are you guys seeing presentation mode, or are you seeing the actual PowerPoint file?
Presentation.
Fantastic. Okay, good. All right. So I wanted to have a conversation and introduce you guys to the concept of rangeland inventory and monitoring today, because our grazing management plan is really going to be structured in the spirit of conducting an inventory and creating a plan for monitoring rangeland trend. And so knowing what that looks like and the things that are included in it is going to be very helpful as we move forward with the management plan. So what my hope is for you guys to get out of today's brief lecture is, first of all, for you to understand the purpose of inventory and monitoring on rangeland, know what the primary steps are of establishing those two programs, and then understand the factors that are used to define what we call ecological sites, and explain why those ecological sites are valuable for society and need to be preserved when we manage rangeland. So your first buzzword, or I guess it's your third buzzword today, is ecological sites. So we're going to spend a lot of time on rangeland inventory, rangeland monitoring, and ecological sites. All right, so the topics that we're going to work through are inventory and monitoring. Then we'll get into the site descriptions, talk about survey methods, and then end with rangeland condition and rangeland trend. So with inventory and monitoring, these two terms can get a little bit confusing. So it's important to know their definition, and because that's going to really feed into how you use them in a conversation as well as a management plan. So rangeland inventory is really just an inventory list. So it's a descriptive list of what is present on a piece of rangeland. So we're talking about a very specific site here. So it can be, if we have a 250 acre piece of rangeland, like we do for the beef unit at the university farm or north of Chico, but attached to the farm. A rangeland inventory would be, where are the fences at? What is the acreage going to be? What is existing on the land as far as structures? Where are the corrals at? Where are the water sources at? Are there any natural ecological sites there? Are there vernal pools there? Is there a creek? And then the next layer of depth there is what does that land produce? So what vegetation is there? When does germination take place? When does growth take place? When does death take place if we're dealing with annuals, or dormancy if we're dealing with perennials? So it really is just a descriptive list of everything on a piece of rangeland. And it can or cannot include livestock resources. So it can or cannot include the livestock that is there, the wildlife species that are there, etc. Now, as we flip gears, rangeland monitoring uses what is created in an inventory, but it really is a systematic approach or a process to evaluate how a piece of rangeland responds to our management actions over time. And so the monitoring program is going to be something that is going to be done most likely on an annual basis, sometimes twice a year, for 5, 10, 15, 100 years. Okay, so it just depends on the goal. So again, an inventory is just a list of resources. Monitoring is associated with some sort of plan to assess the trend of rangeland over time. So as we switch back and talk about range inventory, the primary components that you will see listed out in a summary of inventory is always going to start with the generalities of the land. So the basics. So land area, how big the pastures are, if there are pastures. Pasture sizes can really be in acreage or it can be in sections. So first of all, and if you've taken 294 with me, you guys should know the answer to this question. So go ahead and pop up if you know it. How many acres are in a section?
640.
640. Thank you. All right. So when we get to rangeland that looks, that is really extensive and big, and there's not a lot of people in those areas or cities, think like central Nevada and Utah, parts of New Mexico. It's really tedious to think of those landscape structures in small acres. They actually have to be managed in sections. And so we're going to talk both about acreage versus section throughout the class. One example that I like to give, just to give you some context, is when I was in grad school at New Mexico State, we were always worked on what we called the College Ranch, and which was just north of Las Cruces. And it was outside of the city, it was on the way to Albuquerque. I-25 went right through the middle of it. But for context, that ranch was 100 sections in size. So how many acres would that be? If you got 100 sections, how many acres are we dealing with?
$640,000.
So
no,
so
64,000.
There you go. You got it. Close. Just an extra zero there. So 64,000 acres. So keep in mind, this is New Mexico, kind of high desert area. How many cows do you think we could run on this place? 64,000 acres. How many cows could that 64,000 acres support? What do you think?
You mean year round?
Yep. Just take some guesses, guys.
Like 1,000? I don't know,
Okay.
more.
1,000's a great guess and a starting point. That's too high though, Cheyenne.
640.
Good guess. Still too high. Looks like we got a chat. 320, good guess, Calvin. Thank you. Still too high.
Be like 150.
Getting closer, Tommy. Thank you. Still a little bit too high.
$100 cows.
100 cows. 100 section for 100 cows. Is that a lot different than out here in the West? 64,000 acres for 100 cows, right? So when we talk about managing 64,000 acres, I don't want to talk about each individual 64,000 acres, right? So it's easier to split that up into sections. And so in big extensive country like that, we tend to manage rangeland in landscapes rather than what we do here, like at the university farm, on an acre by acre basis. So pasture size becomes really important because that's going to be your first key on how we actually go about managing a piece of land. So it's, if you guys have ever, and we've been out of school for a while now, so it may be a moot point, but the Butte Creek Ecological Reserve up off of Highway 32 that is associated with Chico State but managed by the College of Natural Science, that piece of property is about 4,000 acres, but they actually manage in almost half acre components because the terrain changes so much. So they manage in ecotones rather than by the acre or by the section. So pasture size is going to be a really big key component to how we manage a piece of land. Other things that you will find in a range inventory are going to be things like watering points and types of water. So when we think about livestock and wildlife species, they're going to utilize a lot of different types of water. So this could be, stock tanks, like we see in this picture here. It could be streams, it could be rivers, it could be lakes, it could be stock ponds, it could be natural springs. So watering points are really important to make sure that you map and have a good idea of where they're at and how many they are, because water is one of the best ways to change grazing distribution with livestock and wildlife species. All right, fences are a big one. And sometimes we don't know where fences are at. And so that's going to be one of the first things that we learn when we get to using Google Earth is how to build in fences and see where fences are from a satellite image. Because a lot of times fences are going to not only be the border of our land, but it's actually, if we have cross fencing occurring, it's actually going to allow us to build in some pastures to where we can rest rangeland at certain times of the year. Corrals or catch pens are going to be really important, especially from a kind of a livestock management standpoint. So those areas tend to get used pretty heavily at 2 to 3 times a year, right? So when we turn out, they get used really heavily. And when we gather, they get used really heavily. And so those are areas where you can have really dense compaction take place. We can see water runoff with some major issues and sediment taking place, etc. And then buildings, if there's any buildings on the rangeland, and that can be as simple as, houses, barns, outbuildings, etc. Or in the case of our country here in California, especially in the foothills along the Sierra Nevadas, those buildings and structures could be like old mine shafts and stuff. And so we have to manage those and be cognizant of those as well, because they have some repercussions as far as rangeland health too. And then roads. Roads are really, really important because they are the #1 source of contamination of water that falls on rangeland. And so it's not that, that's a good way to put this. It's not that roads are evil. It's that roads are used often enough on a lot of pieces of rangeland that it doesn't give vegetation a chance to grow back and cover up that topsoil. So when it rains, we see a lot of leaching happening. And if you're on any sort of topography, like on the side of a hill or going up or down hills or in ravines, then you're going to see runoff of that topsoil on roads. And so that topsoil can then pull contaminants into tributaries and river systems. All right, so on the other side of this, some variables that we may want to consider measuring for our monitoring plan. So keep in mind, we're going to monitor rangeland to track long-term trend. And so some of these variables are going to be big ones that we would think of, and then maybe some other ones that aren't on this list. So precipitation is going to be directly correlated to forage production. So it's important that we have rain gauges somewhere, okay, or at least the ability to capture precipitation levels at a surrounding property. And then forage production is going to be one of those things where we need to go out at least once a year and collect or do a ring toss and collect a few different samples and measure how much forage is actually being produced. And so those two things tend to be highly correlated to one another. They're also going to be a major point of management. We also want to make sure that we are monitoring changes in ecological condition. So, for example, our piece of property of the beef units that is north of town, it doesn't have great ecological condition about half the year. And the reason for that is because during the fall and the spring, end of fall, winter, and spring, where we get our precipitation. We have really good annual grasses that come on that cattle can graze and they're happy. But as soon as it starts to warm up and we take the cows back to the university farm, we end up getting some massive amounts of star thistle in that area. And so the quality of that rangeland takes a digger big time as soon as that star thistle starts coming on. We may also want to monitor livestock productivity. So there's different ways to do that. The best, most efficient trait measure on that is, I'll just use cattle as an example, but you can use it in sheep as well, is pounds of calf weaned per cow exposed. So pounds of calf weaned per cow exposed to being bred. So if she had a chance to get bred and she didn't have a calf, then her calf will not contribute to her pounds weaned. And so that's just one measure of livestock productivity. In my opinion, out here in the West, that's probably the most efficient one. Other things that we can take into consideration are financial returns. For example, this year is going to suck ass, right? Because cattle prices are low and we're weaning early, so we don't have as many pounds to deal with. So our productivity, our finances are going to be quite a bit lower this year. Riparian health is something we're going to spend a lot of time talking about in this class. You're going to see a couple of lectures around around riparian health, and then we're going to spend at least one lab, maybe two labs, kind of looking at riparian health issues on the piece of rangeland that we're developing the plan for. So riparian health is really important because it is going to be where, if we have a really good, healthy riparian area, that means that we've got quite a bit of moisture. We've got a lot of diversity in the species of vegetation that we're seeing there, a good balance between annuals, perennials, shrubs, and trees. And it's plentiful. It's not dirt, right? So riparian health is one of those things that we have to monitor so that we can maintain high water quality. And so keep in mind, 80% of the rainfall that falls here in California falls on rangeland first. So because we are dependent on that rainfall to flow into tributaries and storage systems like Shasta Dam and Oroville Dam, and our crops are dependent on that water, and we use a lot of that water for drinking water as well. And so we want it to be healthy and free of contaminants. And the more healthy the riparian system, the more healthy and the higher the water quality is. We will also create a section for monitoring soil or watershed health. Soil health is really important. We want to make sure that we are, leaving enough topsoil, enough cover crops, those type of things, so that we aren't exposing the soil and we aren't letting out unnecessary carbon. We can monitor for wildlife populations. This is actually a fun one. So if you've ever just gone out to a piece of property and, or maybe a wildlife preserve, and you just sit for an hour and just make a note of every different type of species that you see. Those wildlife populations are a really good indicator of riparian health. So the more diverse the wildlife is that you see, the more healthy the rangeland is. And so there's a company out there called Point Blue, and you guys may have heard of them. They work with the Regenerative Ag Center and Dr. Daly quite a bit, but they actually monitor for avian species on rangeland, because the greater diversity you have of avian species, the healthier your rangelands are. So it's pretty cool. And then use of grazing as well. We'll talk about that in depth. That's going to be, you know, a big, huge component of this class. And then how many livestock or head of livestock or numbers of livestock are actually on in particular pastures or on entire properties or allotments. I think I got a chat. Okay. I think we're good. All right. So when we start the process of establishing an inventory monitoring or assessment program, we have to begin with the end in mind. So we're going to, as a class, we're going to spend some time talking about objectives. So this grazing management plan that we are going to develop, we're going to spend some time talking about why do we even need this management plan? So what are the objectives of this piece of land? What are the objectives of the agency that is managing it? And those could be really clear, like the objective of, you know, this piece of land is to provide habitat for wildlife species, or it could be super convoluted. And so a lot of times with the objective section of a grazing management plan and the goal section of it, you have like big overall goals, and then underneath it you have objectives like in sub objectives. So they can get pretty extensive. We also want to make sure that we identify the changes that we want to see. So we've got to name the changes, and then we've got to come up with a plan to actually make the changes. And then we've got to monitor along the way. And another piece of the assessment program is we have to clearly define how the data that we collect is going to be used to make management decisions. And this is a big sticking point for me, because if we are collecting data for the sake of collecting data, we're wasting time and money for information that isn't going to be useful. And so we're going to spend some time talking about the different types of data that can be collected that is going to really help us make management moves with pieces of property. All right. So mapping is a huge first step to creating a grazing management plan. And so this is going to be one of our first steps after we get introduced to the site. So mapping can occur in a lot of different ways. It can be my dad taking a piece of computer paper out to a piece of property and drawing a map and putting in gates and hills and trees and that type of thing. So not the most sophisticated, but when he's sending you out at 5 o'clock in the morning in the dark on a horse and you've never been to a piece of property before, it's better to have nothing because your cell phone won't work, right? All right, so mapping can look as low key as that, or it can be a really extensive ArcGIS map, or oh, what is Dad just showed me a new map that he's been using for fires. CalTopo, does that sound familiar? Have you guys heard of that? The CalTopo map? I don't, we'll investigate it. We'll use it, or we'll try to use it. If Dad can use it, I'm confident that I can make that happen. So, all right. And so with mapping, we're going to use a couple of different resources to create our maps. Google Earth is going to be a big one. I would love to teach you ArcGIS, but I don't even know how to use it, in all honesty. And I am not at a point mentally where I can learn another piece of software after the last 2 years. So I will eventually get there, but Google Earth is pretty good, and it's free, and it has a lot of unique characteristics so it's going to be what we use this semester. Normally we would integrate our map system and our map software with GIS field data. So if we were in person, guys, we would spend a whole lab walking out with our GPS sets or with our GPS devices, and we would be putting in locations of things like water sources and fences and those type of things. So those become really important as you're starting to build an inventory. And then how accurate you are when it comes to your map really depends on your objectives. if you want to increase the number of fairy shrimp in a vernal pool, if that's one of your objectives for a piece of property, then you better have a really intricate mapping system that is going to map that particular pond down to within 1 to 2 feet of location. And so, whereas if we're trying to manage 300,000 acres in central Nevada, we can use a Google map to kind of put boundaries around where that's at. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit. We've talked through what an inventory is and what a monitoring plan is. It kind of gives us some parameters for where we're going. The next part of this quick lecture is to really introduce you to this concept called ecological sites. So an ecological site is going to be land that basically looks and acts the same. So it is a kind of land that has very specific physical characteristics. So the same type of soil, same type of topography, same type of climate. All right, so ecological sites are also going to be grouped together based on what it can produce. Okay, so for example, if we, what's a good, just a really basic one is Bidwell Park. Lower Park is a different ecological site than Upper Park, if that makes sense. Okay, and so with that similar, or we're going to be looking at ecological sites that the inventory of ecological sites within one allotment area. All right, so this is an example of how we can categorize an ecological site. So on the top here, we have got a section of land that isn't nearly as steep as this face of this hillside here. And it is going to grow a different type of vegetation. So the land in between these two top black marks, that's one ecological site. Ecological site number 2 is kind of the face of this ridge here. Ecological site number 3 is a little bit harder to distinguish, but the vegetation helps you out here. So this is going to be area that is definitely not flat on the river bottom, but also not as steep as these sandy areas here on the face of the ridge. And oh, come on. Oh, go back. Nope. There we go. All right. And then our 4th ecological site is going to be both sides of this creek here because it has similar vegetation, similar topography, and other similar characteristics. So this area here and this area on this side of the creek are both the same ecological site. And then our last one is going to be this ecological site over here. So it's actually between the fence and the highway. And so in this is just a really good example of how we can split up different ecological sites. So this is going to be something that we're going to focus on when we get our maps built as well. So ecological sites can be done from satellite images as well, and you can actually go in and draw borders around certain areas that have similar characteristics. So you can see here we've got the basin floor is going to be its own ecological site compared to the hills. And the hills are going to be its own ecological site compared to the mountains. And then we're going to have a mesa top site. Okay, so and then it looks like over here we've got the valley floor. So I'm thinking we're seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think 5 different ecological sites just in this one image. So lots of diversity, lots of things to manage. And it's important that we know where they're at because they're all going to be managed with grazing livestock in different ways. All right, so I want to spend just a few minutes talking about soil mapping because you guys are going through the soils lecture today. So you're going to get the basics of like soil physical characteristics and its importance to rangeland. And so we're going to prelude that or complement that, I guess, not prelude it. We're going to complement it with how we map soils because that's really a big first piece to the grazing management plan. So soils have been monitored and tested, and soil type has been determined since 1935. And so if you guys remember back to the history lecture, what agency was developed in 1935? Any guesses?
NRC.
It's, oh, sorry.
Did you hear that, Casey?
No, I didn't. Sorry, go ahead.
NRCS.
NRCS, yeah, what is now known as NRCS. And so the National Resource Soil Conservation District, or whatever it was originally called, started as all of the topsoil was blowing away from the plains during the Dust Bowl. They developed this agency of like, hey, we better preserve some of the soil, right? And so that agency has been intact since then. And they have done really extensive mapping, and they've built this incredible database called Web Soil Survey. So Cheyenne, remind me, we used Web Soil Survey in 294, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so some of you guys are going to be familiar with it and some of you are not, and that's fine. So we're going to step through how to use that resource in a couple of weeks during a lab period. So, but the way that resource is actually set up is with soil map units. And so these units are going to include one or more of the dominant soil type. And so with the soil map unit component, that is actually going to encompass a soil series, the slope of the terrain, and the surface texture of the terrain as well. And so slope and surface texture are things to keep in mind as you walk through the soils lecture this week, if you haven't already done so. So the soil series is really similar to a plant species. Okay, so when we think about things like graminoids, which are grasses, that is a species of plant. So the soil series is going to be like a species of soil or a type of soil. And then a soil map unit component is really similar to a subspecies. So for example, if we equated this back to grasses, if we had graminoid was the main species, the grass species, the subspecies would be, I don't know. I'll just do common name because all my Latin names are leaving me right now. Like Medusa head. Okay, so the soil map unit component would be kind of the subspecies or equivalent to Medusa head, the Medusa head grass. So, all right. So soil map units are going to be really important because they're actually going to be grouped into the mapping mechanism. And so it's important that we have a good understanding of what the soil map units are, because it is going to really determine how far we scale out. So for example, on the piece of property that we did the grazing management plan for last year over in Yuba County, the Daughtry Hill management area, I want to say that piece of property had 8 different soil map units associated with it. So 8 different major types of soil. And whereas if we were here at the university farm out in the pastures, we would have 1. Okay, so it's easy to manage one soil map unit or one type of soil compared to 8 types of soil. And so again, you can only manage what you can measure. All right, so when we create ecological site maps, they are really going to be created based on the soil mapping. That's how an ecological site will start. So we're going to have a location. We're going to designate the ecological sites like we did in the previous figures. Then we're going to lay over the top of it the soil types. And then later on down the road, we're going to lay on top of that the vegetation types. And so that's where you can really start to look at some very specific mapping units as well. And so that's where you can start creating maps like this that are really intense, really, really intense. And so this is an image off of Web Soil Survey. And nope, this is from Jeff. So this is from ArcGIS. And the numbers indicate different soil mapping units. So every time you see a new number, that is a different type of soil. And so we're going to manage grazing animals that are over here on soil 175 a little bit differently than we're going to manage animals that are grazing in area 20. All right, so this is just a fairly general map of major land resource areas across the US. So the key here is really super intensive, but you can see if we just, if we look over here in the West, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different major soil types across the entire state of Nevada. In California, there will be 8 types of soil as you go from Pismo Beach across to the Sierra Nevadas, to the other side of the state. You'll go across 8 soil types. So the reason that we're gonna, talk about different areas of the country relative to soil types is because in California, we are kind of an anomaly. We have so much diversity in soil types, which leads to a diversity in vegetation, and that diverse vegetation also responds to our unique climate. So there's people that consider California to have no rangeland at all, and there's those of us that are in the state that are going, if it's not rangeland, what is it? So I get into discussions all the time with colleagues across the country because they don't think California has rangeland. Drives me nuts. Right. So as we drill down on California, Oregon, parts of Idaho and Nevada, you can see that we've got some major classification areas here when it comes to soil. So these, again, are not super specific, so they're generalities. And so through the Central Valley, we've got 2 major types. We've got the Chico loam stuff, and we've got the Hanford soil. And so we've got, a lot of different soil borders actually occurring here. All right, so the tool that we're going to use, not today, we're going to get to it, is Web Soil Survey. And so this is just kind of their homepage. And so we will eventually navigate to this, and we're going to start the Web Soil Survey process from the NRCS home site. All right, and we're going to hopefully develop images that look like this, okay, except they're going to be prettier. This is an old image and it's black and white. The new images that NRCS has are colored, so that'll be nice. All right, and then we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the technical services that NRCS also provides, and the different types of tools that we can actually use related to the different soil types as well. All right, and so I think most of this is, yeah, we're done. Okay, So that in a nutshell is what I wanted to make sure that we got through today. So because it's setting the context for what our grazing management plans are going to look like. So we're going to build an inventory for our grazing management plan. We're going to build a monitoring plan for our plan. That was weird. And then there's a whole bunch of in between stuff that we're going to do as well. So, all right. I think, okay, we're rolling. We're pretty good. Okay, so let's get to the fun part because I love this lab. We're actually going to only do part of it this week. We'll do the other part next week. But this has to do with the strength finders exercise. So I asked you guys during week 1 to make sure that you got the strength finders book and to take the assessment. And then I think I reminded you last week and on Monday as well. And so just show me, give me raise your hands or check yes, or whatever the reactions are, thumbs up or whatever. How many of you guys have those results with you right now? Okay. So a few. Great. Fantastic. All right. So talk to me about the assessment. How long was the test, do you think?
I'd say less than 30 minutes.
Okay. They asked you a lot of questions though.
A ton, yeah, except for I'm pretty like I can read, and like it said to go with your first like impulse. So I just kind of read both and went with my first impulse. I didn't really think about it too much.
Yeah. Some of those questions, I remember when I took it the first time, I was like, I don't know what to do. I need to think about this. And that was, I had to go back and retake it because, and I'm glad I did because my strengths were completely off the first time.
I kind of want to retake mine too. Is that, or do you have to like rebuy the book again?
You might be able to.
There's an online like free version. It'll give you your 5 like results. That's what I did because I bought the book, but it didn't give me the access code for where I bought the book on. So
Oh, it didn't. Oh, that's a bummer.
yeah.
So, okay. Well, you got the book because you're going to have a really good description. So, all right. So what I want to start with first is I'm going to have you guys, I'm going to put a link in the chat here in just a second. It's to a Google Sheet. And I'm going to have you guys go into that Google Sheet and just put in your top 5 strengths. Okay. So that is what we're going to do first. So let me get the link.
Dr. Diatley, I'm going to log on to Zoom with my computer. So there's going to be 2 of me.
Okay.
Just to give you a heads up. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. There's the link, guys. So go ahead and grab it and just put your 5 strengths in next to your name, please. Oh, I should turn some tunes back on. So we'll just take a couple minutes to do this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have you guys go into breakout rooms with random people. And we're going to do a couple of things here. So let me put it in the chat so everybody has it. So we're going to go around the breakout room and everybody is going to talk about what their 5 strengths were. So what are your 5 strengths? Okay. Are any of your strengths, were you surprised? And then answer the question, I am at my best when. Okay. In the context of your strengths. So those are kind of the 3 questions that I want you guys to kind of go through and roundtable. And then when you're done, I'm curious if the discussion will actually lead into people with common strengths, and if you guys have common personality tendencies and those type of things. So I'm gonna go ahead and set up the breakout rooms, and we're just going to be in there for about 10 minutes. I'll pop in as I can, because I want to hear from you guys, and then we're going to come back and share some commonalities and some differences that we heard among the folks in our rooms. All right, so there's the chat. So what are your 5 strengths? Were you surprised with your results, and you're at your best when? All right, so nope, that's not what I wanted to do. Breakout rooms. Let's make 4 of them. There we go. So all the rooms should be open. And if you guys want to go ahead and head that way, I'll jump in here in a little bit.
class. When we do that in class, like it always helps. Like, oh, like this person had this idea, like it connects perfectly with like an idea that you or myself like would have. I don't know, but I agree with you about that.
Oh, real quick. So Casey, how are we supposed to really answer that last question? We were trying to kind of figure out what it was meaning and answering that way, but just for the context of class, what would be the best interpretation of that?
So let me give you an example that might help. My number one strength is harmony. So I am at my best when people get along. Does that help?
Okay, so it's just as easy as that.
I think so. Yeah. Don't overcomplicate it. It's just kind of this, all of this stuff is kind of self-awareness, self-perceptions type stuff.
Okay, okay.
It's not a
I think-
test. Like you
I
can't
think I
change
can
your
answer it better.
personality. And I don't want to change your personality. You're perfect the way you are. So, but it's just kind of getting you to think about, you know, okay, if these are my strengths, then how does that match up when I'm really doing good at life, whatever that is, you know?
Mhm.
It's because this strength is like in check type of thing.
Okay. Well, I think what I had said before pretty much holds, but yeah, I'm at my best when I'm learning new things just in general. I've always really liked reading. I thrive off of reading encyclopedias. I get lost in Wikipedia all the time. I like finding patterns in things and connecting the knowledge that I learned to.
Tessa, I don't know if you're talking to us or somebody else. You're just on mute. Okay.
No, I wasn't. Sorry.
Hey guys, I'm gonna be a lurker for a second. I had one question in a previous breakout room. They were really confused about the last question. I'm at my best when. So let me give you an example to see if that kind of helps. So like my top strength is harmony. So I'm at my best when people get along. Does that help? Okay, cool. Awesome. Keep going, keep going.
We're kind of already done with everybody, to be
Oh,
honest.
okay, cool. Wow,
Yeah.
this is fast. The other group isn't even through like the second person.
We were all very similar, so we didn't really have much to talk about other than the fact that
Oh.
we were similar.
Okay, so maybe take that conversation a little bit deeper, Tessa. Okay, so with the like the strengths that you guys are similar on, like what common personality traits do you have? You know, or what, how is that strength displayed the same and how is it displayed differently in each individual person? So just give me an example. What was one trait that like most of you guys had, or one strength?
We all worked well when we were going toward a goal. We're like goal-oriented people.
Okay, but what about the strength stuff?
Oh, yeah, it was the achiever strength. That's most of
Achiever?
it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what does achieving look like to you? Yes, you do well when you achieve, but what does that mean? Does that mean getting good grades? Does that mean, you know, going to bed on time? Does that mean I didn't fight with my dad today? You know, what does achieving mean to you? Okay.
Okay.
Like, yeah, they're probably really detailed, but like, who wants to spend that much?
Yeah. Well, this is a good time to ask Dr. Diatley, John, about if you could do that way.
Well, I think that book's gonna be, you're gonna need it no matter what. I was just looking at the syllabus. Oh, she's in here right now.
Mm-hmm.
Diatley. I know I haven't bought the book yet, and I know it's required. And we were just talking about how they didn't have access codes to the books they bought.
Okay,
I
because
was
they
wondering if
got them used.
I'm not too sure what like I'm pretty sure she bought one bought at Barnes and Noble and the other bought on Amazon.
Hmm.
I just wasn't
Mine
sure if
had an
that.
access code. mine had an access code. I got it at Barnes and Noble for $30.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And is
So
that access code gonna be required down the line too?
no, because you only take the test once. So it's important that you take the test, know your strengths, and have a description of your strengths. So if you can do all three of those things without a book, awesome. I don't know how you're going to do it, but so there's and that's where that link that I put in the email last week, that can get you to the electronic version of that.
Okay. And that we're still gonna need that book down the line though, right?
So we're going to need it at least one more lab.
Okay. So should I still buy it?
I would encourage you to.
Okay.
I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna be, it's not like chemistry. We're not gonna do questions out of it, but it's one of those things that I continue to go back to when I feel like I'm getting rocked by a situation or something like that. And I can go back and read the description of my strengths again and be like, oh, that person's being an asshole. No wonder I'm not in my strengths. That type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it keeps you on the right path mentally.
Yeah. So that's just my experience with it.
I got you.
Awesome. Okay, and then I did have a question in one breakout room. That last question was a little bit too vague. So I don't know if you guys had issues with it or not. But let me just give you my example. So harmony is like my top strength. And so I'm at my best when people are nice to each other and aren't in conflict, if that makes sense. Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna visit one more breakout room, then I'll probably pull you guys back in a couple minutes, okay?
Thank you.
You bet. Hi guys, how are you doing?
We're good. We talked about our stuff. A couple of our group members don't have books, so
Okay.
there's only a couple of us that took the quiz and we got through our stuff.
Okay, yep. So that is making sure that we take the quiz and have the description is a really essential part of this whole process. So hopefully when you get the book, it will make a little bit more sense. And we're going to be using these resources in at least one more lab. So, all right, cool. Did you guys have questions with the or have problems with the last question? I'm at my best when, or were you okay?
I think we're all pretty good for the most part.
Okay, I was just going to give you my example. But if you guys are okay, that is totally fine.
Wait, can we hear? I want to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we still hear it?
Okay, so harmony is my top strength. And so I'm at my best when people are nice to each other and not in conflict. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one I was leaning towards and saying.
Cool.
So like for we're best, or we're at our best when, are you wanting us to choose from like our top 5 or like
Yep.
just in general?
Nope.
Like, okay.
So from in the context of those 5 strengths,
Uh-huh.
kind of spend a second and reflect of like, okay, this was a really great time in my life. And why do you think it was, like, relative to your strengths? Why do you think it was?
And was the top strengths the first one that came up?
Yep.
On it? Okay, cool.
Yeah, but you can, I mean, they're all fairly equal. Like, they, like, strength 1 is not necessarily as or is equally as important as strength 5. Okay, so you can make that or use that example for that I'm at my best when for any of the strengths that just kind of pop up in your mind.
Right. Okay. Sweet.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys just a couple more minutes. We'll finish up this breakout room and then I'll pull you back into the main session and I want to hear what you have to say, okay?
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, we'll see you in a minute.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, guys, welcome back. As everybody is kind of dropping back into this main session, I am really curious to hear what kind of the common themes were among the 4 rooms. So, or maybe there weren't common themes. Maybe there were a lot of differences. So if somebody from each room would want to give a summary, that would be wonderful. All right, so I think we're all back. Yes, we are. All right. Okay, so how about, let's start with room number 4. So Alexa, Luke, Nicole, Taylor, and Valeria. Anybody want to give us a rundown?
I can.
Awesome, thank you.
So yeah, a couple of our group members didn't have their books, but they still kind of looked at the list of, I'm totally blanking on words.
Strengths.
Yeah, and they kind of related to themselves to those. And some said that they work best when there is no conflict, work best when there's a plan. We all kind of came to the decision that we were agreed that we always work better when there's a plan, like discipline, consistency, keeping us organized. We like to be kind of on track, told what to do, and just, get our stuff done. We don't like to be stressed under pressure.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we came up with.
Don't like to be stressed under pressure. Isn't that an oxymoron for a college student?
Pretty much.
Awesome. That's a great summary. Thank you, room 4 and Nicole. How about room 3? So Alex, John, Cheyenne, and Steph.
I can go for the group.
Great.
Being
Great.
as 3 out of the 5 of mine were talking related.
That's great.
So, all of ours were very different. I mean, we shared some like common ones, just not in the same order, like achiever. And then I know that Stephanie, she had some really cool, like she was like, a leader, self-believer, a coach, problem solver. But we all decided like we work best under like different conditions.
Cool.
So yeah, so like Alec had said that he works best when he's like achieving his goals. And then Stephanie was interesting because she said she doesn't necessarily believe that she worked best like as being a deliverer, but she said it aligned with her morals and her values. So I thought that was like interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was cool. And then mine was like, I just work best as like I include everyone, and that's true to me. I can't do something unless everyone feels included. So I felt like they were true to our, personalities and things like that.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah, it's funny that you say that because you guys are at the best point in your life to actually take these assessments, because you're at your most authentic raw self is the way that the kind of the literature talks about it, because the world hasn't tainted you yet is what happens, and life hasn't gotten in your way yet. And so like in your late teens, early 20s is the perfect time to take these assessments, because it really gives you a good idea of your authentic self. And then it's good to be aware of that, because as you move into world tainting age, like some of us, you can bounce back to that and be like, okay, I got to remember I am good when this is in place. I am good when this is in place, that type of thing. So awesome. Okay. Thank you for that. How about room 2? So Court, Caitlin, Tessa, Tommy, any of you guys want to go?
I can talk, or Courtney, whatever. We could split it if we want. We kind of,
you may need to split it.
yeah. We kind of talked about each one of ours, and we found some common themes between some of us. And then like Lupita, she felt a little different from what Courtney and Tommy said. So we basically said that we really like to be goal oriented. Me and Courtney both worked well when we had a close deadline. So because we like to be procrastinators if we have a long time to finish something. But Lupita said that she really wasn't a goal oriented person, but she really liked to keep her things organized and make sure that she was on track necessarily. So it wasn't like achieving, but still organizing and keeping everything together.
Yeah.
So that wasn't what motivated her. And then we just kind of talked about the quiz and how it differed for all of us and what was hard about it, and kind of just discussing why we chose certain things. And you have anything to add, anybody?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate that. And our last room. So Eileen, Kelvin, Luz, Nitzy, Raylene, Cheyenne. Uh-oh.
A couple members
Okay.
didn't have their results yet,
Okay.
but from those who did, a couple of us had the discipline strength. And so we were kind of talking about how we enjoy our routines and structures. So we have a lot of to-do list, planners, Excel sheets, you know, a bunch of other stuff for organizing our day and listing out our life. And so that was definitely a pretty common theme, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then do I just answer like the other questions, or what else?
No, I just kind of wanted a summary from what you guys talked about in your room. So, all right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. So this next exercise is my favorite piece of any lab all semester. And so I debated, because I know that there's some of you that haven't taken the test yet, and having that context really kind of helps with this process. So, but I think there's enough people in rooms that have taken the test and understand the different descriptions and stuff like that, that you guys can navigate through this. So normally I would love to do this in person, because the one time that I actually was able to teach this class in person 2 years ago, unbelievable, there was yelling and fighting, and it was fantastic. So I am going to add a file into, oh, darn it, hang on. Oh, maybe it'll let me do it. It's just a Word document. It's called Airplane Crash Group Activity. And so it is in the chat right now. So if you guys can get that open to where you see it, I'm going to kick you guys back to your breakout rooms here in just a second, but we're going to take 20 minutes to work through this problem. So the scenario is that basically you've crashed in northern Canada and off on an airplane. The only people that to survive is like you and your group. It's cold. Nearest town is 20 miles away. And all you have is the list of items that are in that table. So don't worry about the individual piece to this. Actually, no, I take that back. We are going to worry about the individual piece to this. So before I kick you back to your breakout rooms, I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes just in here of quiet time. I'll turn the music back on to look through this list item and rank individually the order of importance of every single item. So I think they're like 12 items. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 12 items. That's right. Yeah, so 12 items in order of 1 to 12, which ones are the most important to you. And then we're going to do the same process, but in our groups. And so you got to come up with a group priority list. All right, so Everybody cool? Does everybody have access to the file? Okay. All right. So I'm going to start my timer 5 minutes. I'll turn the music back on. I'm going to pause record.
For our group, we kind of started talking about like what we wanted to put first, and we kind of got like, I guess, tense, but not in a bad way, about what we wanted to put first. So we kind of moved away from that and went to the end and what we wanted to put last. And then once we came back to the top, then we were kind of in agreement because we really discussed like what our goals were for moving. So I think that helped. Like if we hit a hard spot, we kind of stopped and then redirected and then went somewhere else. And then once we came back, we were kind of in better agreement.
Cool. So who led the redirecting, do you think, in your group?
I think it was me. Mostly.
So what's your strengths? What's your 5 strengths?
I'm a focus, achiever, significance. Oh, there's 2 more. Relator, and there's 1 more. I don't have it written down right next to me.
That's okay.
Futuristic.
So, okay. So the future comment, or not the future comment, the focus comment and the achiever comment told me what I needed to know. Like you're gonna achieve the goal no matter what you have to do to get there. So manipulation, other suggestions, those type of things. Awesome. Okay, thank you. Group 3. What was your conversation like?
So our conversation got pretty tense, but it was more in the but it was more in the middle of it. We were in agreement on like the first probably like 3 items, and then after basically items 4 to about 7 was where we really struggled because it's kind of like a necessity but also not. So we went through a lot of different options as to what we wanted to put there, and we changed it so many times. But we finally came to an agreement and it like actually ended up working really well. So
cool. Who is the most outspoken in your group, Steph?
It was Cheyenne, the talkative one.
So Cheyenne, what's your strengths?
It was like inclusive, achiever, woo, communication, positivity.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. All right. What about group 4?
So we were pretty all in agreement most of the time. We kind of just went through and we're like, like what did everybody put for 1? And then we said, like if somebody had something different, then why we had that different, and then decided what would be best. And we kind of took it in the order of like, we chose like a compass, and we wanted, like, we took it in sections, I guess, like we want to get where we're going. And then we did like heat. So like what we, just kind of what we thought was the most important. There were some places where we didn't get like tense or anything, but we had, kind of, I don't even know if we disagreed, but there were some places that we weren't all in agreement with, but we kind of just talked it out and it all ended up fine.
Awesome. And Nicole, remind me, I think you guys told me you have, or the people in your group there were a few that had similar strengths, right?
Yeah. Like discipline was one that we all had, or most had.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, it doesn't surprise me that you guys had like good talking conversations without a lot of conflict if your strengths are similar, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of the take-home message of this exercise, was that everybody's important. Everybody is going to make decisions in a life or death situation a different way based on what their strengths are. How they go about doing that is going to be really reflective of their strengths and their priorities and stuff. So, okay, cool. So really quickly, we'll just go back down through the list, and I'm recording, so I've got it. But group 1 through 4, just give me your list. Okay, so 1 to 12. Okay, so group 1, go for it.
Do you want the reasoning behind the list or just straight up the list?
Nope, just the straight up list. Mostly
Okay.
I don't want to, we don't have time to go through the reasoning is the big thing.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So for our group, we chose the extra shirt and pants for each survivor as number 1, the heavy duty canvas as number 2, the cigarette lighter number 3, the ball of steel wool number 4, the can of Crisco shortening number 5, the small axe number 6, the newspapers number 7, the family size chocolate bars number 8, the quart of 100 proof whiskey at number 9, the compass at 10, the loaded pistol at 11, and the air map made of plastic at 12.
Cool. Great. Thank you. All right, group 2.
Okay, so for number 1, we had the extra shirt and pants for each survivor. Number 2, we chose the sectional air map made of plastic. Number 3 was the heavy duty canvas. Number 4, we chose the compass. Number 5 was the small axe. Number 6 was the 100 proof whiskey. Number 7 was the family-sized chocolate bars. Number 8, we chose the pistol. 9 was the can of Crisco. 10 was the ball of steel wool. 11 was the cigarette lighter. And 12 was newspapers.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right, what about group 3?
We had the heavy duty canvas is 1, extra shirt and pants for 2, ball of steel wool 3, cigarette lighter 4, a small axe 5, the Crisco as 6, the air map 7, pistol 8, a compass 9, chocolate bars 10, whiskey is 11, newspapers 12.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks, Steph. All right, and group number 4, what's your list?
Our list was just a compass first, extra shirt and pants second, a loaded 45 caliber pistol, a small axe for 4th, a ball of steel wool for 5th, newspapers for 6, 1 quart of 100 proof whiskey for 7, cigarette lighter for 8, the sectional air map for 9, the heavy duty canvas for 10, the can of Crisco for 11, and the chocolate bars for 12.
Fantastic. All right, perfect. Thank you guys. Okay, are you guys ready to hear what the solution is? If I can find it. Come on.
There's a solution?
There is. So I'll let you interpret. I'm going to read this out to you. Okay. So, all right. So mid-January is the coldest time of year in northern Canada. The first problem the survivors face is the preservation of body heat and protection against its loss. This problem can be solved by building a fire, minimizing movement and exertion, using as much insulation as possible, and constructing a shelter. Before taking off, a pilot has to file a flight plan, which contains vital information such as the course, speed, estimated time of arrival, type of aircraft, and number of passengers. Search and rescue operations begin shortly after the failure of a plane to appear at its destination at the estimated time of arrival. The 20 miles to the nearest town is a long walk under even ideal conditions, particularly if one is not used used to walking such distances. In this situation, the walk is even more difficult due to shock, snow, dress, and water barriers. It would mean almost certain death from freezing and exhaustion. At temperatures of -25 to -40, the loss of body heat through exertion is a very serious matter. Once the survivors have found ways to keep warm, their next task is to attract the attention of search planes. Thus, all the items the group has salvaged must be assessed for their value in signaling the group's whereabouts. All right, so here's our list, okay? And so the ranking of the items was made by a former Army instructor in survival training. So can we just all agree that it's right for the sake of being right? Okay, so if you are disagree, your disagreement is not with me, it's with the Army Ranger, okay? All right. So number 1, cigarette lighter without fluid. So the gravest danger facing the group is exposure to cold. The greatest need is source for warmth, and the second greatest need is for signaling devices. This makes building a fire the first order of business. Without matches, something is needed to produce spark, and even without fluid, a cigarette lighter can do that. All right, number 2, a ball steel of wool. In order to make the fire, the survivors need a means of catching the spark made by the cigarette lighter. This is the best substance for catching a spark and supporting a flame, even if the steel wool is a little wet. 3, extra shirt and pants for each survivor. So I think 2 groups had that as number 1. So it's actually number 3, but it is up there. So good job. Besides adding warmth to the body, clothes can also be used for shelter, signaling, bedding, bandages, string when unraveled, and fuel for the fire. Number 4 is a can of Crisco shortening. A can of shortening has many uses. A mirror-like signaling device can be made from the lid. After shining the lid with steel wool, it will reflect the sunlight and generate 5 to 7 million candle power. That's actually really bright. This is bright enough to be seen beyond the horizon. While this could be limited somewhat by the trees, a member of the group could climb a tree and use the mirrored lid to signal search planes. If they had no other means of signaling than this, they would have a better than 80% chance of being rescued within the first day. There are other uses for this item. It can be rubbed on exposed skin for protection against the cold. When melted into oil, the shortening is helpful as fuel. When soaked into a piece of cloth, melted shortening will act like a candle. The empty can is useful for melting snow for drinking water. It's much safer to drink warmed water than to eat snow, since warm water will help retain body heat. Water is important for dehydration because dehydration will affect decision making. This can also be useful as a cup. So lots of purpose for Crisco. All right, number 5, the 20 by 20 foot piece of canvas. Cold makes shelter necessary. The canvas would help protect against wind and snow. You could spread it on a frame of trees. It could be used as a tent or windscreen. Might also be used as a ground cover to keep the survivors dry. Number 6 is the small axe. So you need an axe to chop wood. Number 7, family-sized chocolate bars, 1 per person. Chocolate will provide some food energy. Since it contains mostly carbohydrates, it supplies the energy without digestive demands on the body. Number 8 is newspapers, 1 per person. They're useful in starting a fire. They can also be used as insulation under clothing when rolled up and placed around a person's arms and legs. A newspaper can also be used as a verbal signaling device when rolled up into a megaphone. It could also provide reading material for recreation while you're waiting for your rescue plane. All right, number 9 is the loaded .45 caliber pistol. The pistol provides a sound signaling device, not murder, just sound. The international distress signal is 3 shots fired in rapid succession. So there have been numerous cases of survivors going undetected because they were too weak to make enough noise loud enough to attract attention. So the butt of the pistol could be used as a hammer. Make sure to unload it first. The powder from the shells will assist in fire building. By placing a small bit of cloth in a cartridge emptied of its bullet, one can start a fire by firing the gun at dry wood on the ground. The pistol also has some serious disadvantages. Anger, frustration, impatience, irritability, and lapses of rationality may increase as the group awaits rescue. The availability of a lethal weapon is a danger to the group under these conditions. Although a pistol could be used in hunting, it would take an expert marksman to kill an animal with it. Then the animal would have to be transported to the crash site, which could prove difficult to impossible depending on its size. Number 10 is the quart of 100 proof whiskey. And I think a lot of you guys had that in the number 10 spot. So good job. The only uses of whiskey are as an aid in fire building and as such for fuel for a torch made by soaking a piece of cloth in whiskey and attaching it to a tree branch. The empty bottle could be used for storing water. The danger of whiskey is that someone might drink it thinking it would bring warmth. Alcohol takes on the temperature it's exposed to, and a drink of minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit whiskey would freeze a person's esophagus and stomach. Alcohol also dilates the blood vessels in the skin, resulting in chilled blood being carried back to the heart, resulting in rapid loss of body heat. Thus, a person who is drunk is more likely to get hypothermia than a sober person. Food for thought. Number 11 is the compass. The compass might encourage somebody to try to walk to the nearest town. It's a dangerous item. Its only redeeming feature is that it could be used as a reflector of sunlight due to the glass on top. And number 12 is a sectional air map made of plastic. This is also among the least desirable of the items because it will encourage individuals to try to walk to the nearest town. Its only useful feature is as a ground cover to keep someone dry. So there you go, 1 through 12. All right, so talk to me. Were you off? What was surprising?
Off as individuals or off as a group?
Off as a group.
After comparing it, I think group 1 actually did really well. On most of ours, we were 1 or 2 spots off.
Cool.
With a couple of them being like dead on. So we had the air map as last, and the small axe, we got 6th. But everything else was 1 to 2 spots from what it should be. And I think our biggest issue with that was the canvas and the clothes. We had clothes as number 1 because it's like, oh, retaining body heat's going to be number 1, building a fire would be number 2.
Yeah.
And that would be the only reason why. And the heavy duty canvas could be used kind of like for more heat retention, kind of like a heavy duty blanket, keeping snow and stuff off. But then, yeah, fire was definitely top of the list for us. And the order we had that in was pretty, I'd say pretty close to what the actual, quote unquote, actual order was. So
awesome.
I was a little bit surprised and like kind of proud. Good job, group 1.
Awesome. All right. Other comments? Were you guys right on as a group or way off? Group 1, how, or Nicole, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say group 4 was not, we were not very on. I mean, there was some where I don't even think we hit 1 that was on, but we were close, like 2 numbers off on some of them, like the clothes. Yeah. And I think like the whiskey or something. But I realized we didn't really think, I mean, like we were thinking about that one thing, like the can of Crisco, like just that. We weren't really thinking about what the can could be used for or what the lid could be used for or any of that stuff. And so, and like the compass, I guess I didn't really think about walking. Like we were like, the compass is first, like, but yeah, who would really want to walk? So yeah, there were some things we just weren't really thinking about, like the big picture. We were kind of just thinking about that one thing.
Yep. Pretty common. Excellent. All right. Anybody else? All right, cool. So the purpose of this exercise was kind of twofold. So first of all, in the context of your strengths, listening to how people actually convinced other people to put things higher or lower in priority is really a reflection of how we handle stuff as individuals, right? And so the second major purpose was, this is a range science class. We are outside all the time. Pickups break down, tires go flat. You know, there is a chance that you could be spending the night outside. So now you kind of know what is important, and maybe it's like what to carry in a rig if you're out doing monitoring and that type of thing. And survival is good anyway. So so this exercise was kind of twofold. But I really wanted you guys to be able to start making the connection between your strengths and how you go about like achieving goals and dealing with individuals. And the bigger picture of this that we're going to focus on more as we go through the semester is, we're going to be doing a lot of group work together, and everybody has different strengths, and we need to respect those and be respectful of those. And so as we're starting to try to, you know, solve a problem for the greater good, we've got to make sure that we include people and hear from people and know that they're going to, you know, go at a problem from a different perspective. So because I think I told you the first week, solving problems on rangeland where 7 agencies are involved is really, really difficult, right? So that concept of multiple use means multiple people have a stake in the fight, or a dog in the fight, whatever analogy you want to use. And so getting everybody on the same page to move towards a good management goal is very difficult. And so the more you know about yourself, the more you can help people help you, in all honesty. All right, so the last thing before I let you guys get out of here, I'm going to share my screen one more time, and we're going to look at Blackboard. So with Blackboard, oh, no, go the other way. Okay, so I put all of our strengths into a word cloud, and discipline was by far the most frequent in our class, which is good. That's the first time I've ever had that. So usually it's achiever, harmony, and responsibility that tends to be pretty high. All right. So if we look in our lab folder for this week, oh, come on. So annoying. There we go. We've got just a short exercise for you guys to finish out in addition to the quiz this week, due on Friday by the end of day. Is this Strength Finders assignment. And so that assignment is really quick. All you guys got to do is just fill this out, save it as a PDF, and re-upload it. So after reading your signature themes report, complete the following questions. So which of your signature themes describe you best? Which of your themes do you use most frequently? Were you surprised by anything in the report? And which of your themes do you anticipate using most in college and then as you move into your career? All right, so that is our the second thing that is due this week. Any questions? All right, so just give me a thumbs up if you guys are good with what's due this week. If you guys haven't taken the Strength Finders test, I encourage you to make sure and get it done before Friday so you don't lose out on those points. And yeah, I will plan on seeing you guys next Monday at 10 a.m. All right, so I'll hang out if you have questions, and if not, we'll see you next week.
Can we retake the Strengths Finders? I know you said you retook it.